What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Annihilation Conquest. Now, in the last video, we talked about how Blastar, of course, being from the negative zone, had basically been captured by the forces of the Phalanx. A lot of this is because at this point in time, with the Phalanx having captured the Kree homeworld, one of their main focuses is to basically find these different insurgency cells, right? Because the reality is that even though Hala has fallen, there are still people who have not been captured by the Phalanx and who are still fighting back. And so trying to find these different locations is paramount. But with Blastar being so capable, one of the things that he had previously established in the last video is that when it comes to a successful insurgency, you cannot have one person that knows everything, because if that person's captured, the whole insurgency can fall. And so the reality is that everything is effectively compartmentalized, right? Everything's sort of moved into little sections and so on and so forth, where not everybody has the pieces of the puzzle. But with Blastar being so powerful, being so capable, and him more or less kind of being a general of sorts, or at least in some capacity, a leader of the insurgency, he has more information than most. And so what the Phalanx are doing are quite literally forcing information out of this guy. The reality here, though, is that at the end of the day, Blastar's not dumping any information. So while he does succumb to this entire process and basically dies, what we end up doing here is switching over to the High Evolutionary. Now, we will revisit Blastar here in a little bit because there is more going on than we're initially led to believe. But with the High Evolutionary here, of course, there's this kind of conversation that goes on. Now, one of the things to know about Herbert Wyndham is this guy does not suffer fools, and he does not like people who just don't know what's going on. So really, like Phylla-Vell showing up here and saying she was basically sent by the voice of the Supreme Intelligence to grab Adam Warlock and bring him to this location, or at least Adam Warlock brought them here anyway, that she doesn't fully understand what's going on, which is to say why it was that she was doing what she was supposed to do. She was just told to do that. And it pisses off the High Evolutionary because it just annoys him. Like, from his perspective, he's one of these guys where in a lot of ways he's an extreme narcissist, but also rightfully so. When you're a person with an exceedingly high level of intelligence, there is truth to the statement, you're better than the people around you. So coming across a person who's just like, I mean, I'm here, but I don't really know why I'm here. A voice told me to come here. It really is him just getting frustrated. But the other part of that, and what keeps those individuals under a normal circumstance from just becoming exceedingly arrogant and exceedingly full of narcissism, is empathy and understanding. And just kind of being like, okay, look, so I get that, like, you're following orders, right? You're just doing what you're told, and that's it, right? Like, you're told that like some kind of being out there could save everybody or whatever. But the response here, and really the idea, is the High Evolutionary coming to this realization that one, Adam Warlock has been woken up early, but two, his body's developing new powers, things that he wasn't capable of doing before. And so because of all this, because of the fact that this all happened too early, again, instead of him emerging as his more controlled self, and instead of him emerging understanding what his new powers are, which is what he would normally do, he would literally come out of his cocoon and be like, I can do new things, cool, right? Instead, it's just everything kind of running amok, that their stance is, okay, we have to find a way to get these different abilities under control. We have to find a way to get you back to your normal place, at least analyze you and understand what's going on a greater scale. Now, the other part of this is switching over to the forces of Ron and the Accuser, and those individuals who have basically survived, or at least trying to marshal some forces or gather some forces that can help stave off the Phalanx themselves. And so as you have Ron and the Accuser and his forces making their way across the world, they end up coming across what's left of the Annihilation Wave that are basically facing off against the forces of the Phalanx. Now, that's one of the things that I do want to establish, that in a lot of ways, Annihilus was defeated, his campaign was ended, that kind of thing. But the truth about it is that there was also a kind of ceasefire that was given, and a portion of Hala was handed over to a segment of the Annihilation Wave. It was done grudgingly, and it wasn't really done willingly, but it was done nonetheless. But the other thing to understand is the forces of the Annihilation Wave under normal circumstances are very, very oppressive, right? They're immensely capable. But the reality here is the Annihilation Wave is more capable just based on sheer numbers than it is on the individual powers of the person that you're facing off against. So say, for example, you were fighting against somebody like Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man, right? Like, he's just a guy who can duplicate himself. He's not very capable. He's not exceedingly strong. He doesn't really have super strength. So in a one-on-one fight, somebody like Captain America could easily subdue him. But if Jimmy Madrox created 1,000 duplicates of himself and they all attacked Captain America, they would get the upper hand on him. And that's really what it is when it comes to the Annihilation Wave. They kind of rely on attrition more so than anything else, right? Just endless waves that ultimately overtake the force they're fighting against, because that force just can't keep fighting forever. And so while you do have the Annihilation Wave that's able to hold its own to a degree, the forces of the Phalanx are almost equally endless, right? And they're exceedingly capable. But in the middle of all this, Ronan and all his forces are basically discovered. And so in facing off against the Phalanx, it turns into the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the Annihilation Wave, realizing that Ronan is facing off against the Phalanx, they ultimately draw a temporary ceasefire. Under any normal circumstance, because the Kree are here and basically encroaching on territory that belongs to the Annihilation Wave, it would mean war, right? That was one of the aspects of the treaty that was signed. But because things are so dire, again, affiliations and alliances are being made that wouldn't normally be made. So the response of Ronan is, I am called Ronan the Accuser. Yes, I stand against the Phalanx. Take me to your leader, right? Take me to the one that's in charge of your forces. We will form a coalition and we will work together using our resources along with your resources, and we will defeat the Phalanx. Because at the end of the day, sure, we don't necessarily agree on everything, but like we do agree on the fact that we want to live, right? And so long as the Phalanx are here, that's going to be hard to do. So what we end up doing here is we switch over to Peter Quill. Now again, Peter Quill was basically at the beginning of the story. One of the things to remember is that because Hala is quite literally on lockdown, those individuals who were not on the world when the Phalanx took over, they're out of the picture. They're out there somewhere, right? And it's very difficult for them, or it's actually impossible for them to enter the planet of Hala itself. Those people who were here can't get out. So no one enters and no one leaves. That's the kind of circumstance that you're looking at here. So the best you can really do when you're someone like Peter Quill is form a team that can help defeat these things or take these things out. And so what you end up getting is the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, one thing that I do want to establish here, this takes place before the official formation of the team. So when it comes to the coming together of the Guardians of the Galaxy, it wasn't really a one-shot comic, right? It wasn't really like Marvel coming along and saying, and now we present the Guardians of the Galaxy, a team you've never heard of before, but they exist now because reasons. The reality here is that the Guardians of the Galaxy came together one part due to the original Annihilation event, but it was really more of an idea that was being mulled around in the head of Peter Quill just because of the significance of the Annihilation event. But then this event here, Annihilation Conquest, this is kind of the hammer and the nail, right? This is the point where he's like, okay, this is a team that needs to exist. The characters that you see here, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Mantis, and so on, it's really more that he kind of unified them under everything that was going on, but they don't officially have a designation yet. They're not officially a team. They are, but they aren't, right? But the reality here, and one of the things that they had done, is that working as part of this insurgency on Hala, they had actually had some of Groot's spores contained within Blastar. So while Blastar did end up dying, when he did die, those spores basically emanated throughout the entirety of the Babel Spire that belongs to the Phalanx. And what ended up happening is it basically created a kind of 3D map. So where literally you have Mantis that kind of conjures this map by tapping into the mind of Groot and basically shows them exactly what the Spire looks like on the inside. It's effectively a heist mission. Is really what this is. That's kind of this idea going down is like, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get in there and we're gonna blow this Spire up. Now, as you normally expect when it comes to the Guardians of the Galaxy, even in the early formations of the team, no one really takes Peter Quill seriously. Even here they don't, right? Like Rocket Raccoon kind of being the weapons specialist is like, okay, so like, are we gonna blow this place up? And the response of Peter is like, yes, you bloody well are. Like, we're blowing this whole place to pieces, right? Like, are you guys ready? As far as I know, no one else is waging this war. It's up to us. Are you fighting fit? Are you badass shruggers ready to kick some Phalanx butt and save the universe? And they're all just kind of like, I mean, dude, you know, like, I mean, they want to fight, right? They want to fight, and like they want to save the world, right? They want to save Hala and all that kind of stuff. But it's like Peter Quill like trying to amp them up with like a super exciting speech, and it just kind of falls flat. It's cool, right? But this is where the Guardians of the Galaxy start. This is how the team basically begins to form. But jumping back to the High Evolutionary and back to Adam Warlock, the High Evolutionary kind of spills the beans on why he's even in Kree space in the first place. And what he says is he was actually brought here or asked to come here by the Supreme Intelligence for the purpose of basically modifying or adjusting the evolution of the Kree race. Now, this has kind of been a major focal point of the Supreme Intelligence for some time in Marvel Marvel Comics. And this really goes all the way back to a story called Galactic Storm, and it actually goes back further than that. So back in 1987, Chris Claremont and Alan Davis wrote this story in X-Men Annual issue number 11 that introduced something called the Crystal of Ultimate Vision. And the way this thing worked is that those individuals who were able to attain the crystal would basically gain absolute power. But there was a caveat here. The only people who could attain the crystal and actually use it were the ones who never really wanted it in the first place. So which really begged the question, why the hell does this thing even exist? But the thing behind this is that it drew the attention of the Supreme Intelligence. And so what it did is that in a desire to basically elevate the Kree and turn them into a race that could effectively conquer the universe, it sent an emissary to use or to seize the Crystal of Ultimate Vision. The price to be paid for those individuals who seize the crystal with the intention of using it is that it freezes their entire race in terms of evolution, right? So like they don't evolve any further. And so the result of this is that in a story called Operation Galactic Storm, the Supreme Intelligence initiated a war with the Shi'ar race. This involved the Avengers and so on and so forth. And it was a great big huge 19-issue crossover. It was a huge story when it happened, and it was pretty significant. It was one of those landscape changing stories. But the overall reason why this even happened in the first place is because the Supreme Intelligence knew that if it pushed the Shi'ar race far enough, it would detonate its ultimate bomb, right? This bomb that basically could eradicate an entire star system. When that happened, it basically destroyed something like 99% of the Kree race. But that was a decision the Supreme Intelligence went with because it believed it would force the evolution of the Kree, which it did, right? It forced them out of the evolutionary stagnation that came with trying to seize the Crystal of Ultimate Vision. Now, one of the things that happened as a result of this is you didn't really have a kind of civil war among the Kree, but you had like the pink Kree and you had the blue Kree, but they weren't really a unified race. And so as time progressed, they began to unify, but the truth is that the Kree, being the race that it was, had long since been gone, meaning that it was like this race that was capable of just conquering whole universes and things like that. And the reality is that the Supreme Intelligence believed that it had basically just become too weak of a race, right? Like the wars that it fought, it constantly lost, so on and so forth. And so the desire of the Supreme Intelligence was to meet with the High Evolutionary and have the High Evolutionary basically evolve or create a new Kree race that could basically become a replacement for the existing Kree, or at least begin to interbreed with the existing Kree, and then just kind of move them into another state of evolution, right? Where they would just become more capable. Now, what ended up happening is that during the events of Annihilation, the Supreme Intelligence went missing, right? It was basically gone. The result of this is that the High Evolutionary kept working on its own. And eventually he succeeded in this. He ultimately succeeded in creating a perfect Kree. And so what he does is kind of present the situation to Adam Warlock and to Phylla-Vell and so on and so forth. But before they can really go any further with any of this stuff, the High Evolutionary tries to make a bargain and simply saying that like it doesn't really want to stay here anymore because of the fact that even it can be overtaken, or even he can be overtaken by the Phalanx. And so his response is, if you give me safe passage out of Kree space, I will give you your evolved Kree warriors. But of course, there's no way in or out of Kree space. It's literally out of phase with the rest of the universe. So it's almost like what the Phalanx did is they cut the entirety of Kree space out of the universe and put it somewhere else. You can't go anywhere, right? Like if you were to try to keep going far enough, you would inevitably run into a kind of wall, right? So like there'd be nowhere for you to go. And the result of this is that they're all effectively stuck there. But then in the middle of that, you basically get the forces of the Phalanx that teleport directly to the High Evolutionary and Adam Warlock, which are led by Ultron. Of course, again, he himself saying he wanted to take a more hands-on approach. The first thing he does is he kills Moondragon right off the bat, literally punches a hole in her chest and kills her on the spot. The next thing he says is, Adam Warlock, you're the person I've been searching for, right? You are the one that I seek. And the response of Adam Warlock is, okay, that's cool, man, but understand, if you're coming for me, Ultron, you're not gonna like what you're gonna find. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Peace.